But I talked with Andrew Shaffer last year when Hope Never Dies came out, and here's a little bit of what we were talking about a year ago. Where could possibly the idea have come to take these political figures and turn them into sleuths and detectives? It doesn't really compute, although it does seem to make sense. But where did the idea for it come from?
Yeah, the idea just came from seeing Joe Biden in his aviator shades and going, that guy's an action hero. And then he opens his mouth, sticks his foot in it, and then you think, maybe not. But when you see them together, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, they're almost like, Barack is the cool, calm, collected one. Joe seems like the more down-to-earth one. It's almost like Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Mm-hmm. And I go, well, you know what? Mystery writers have been ripping off Sherlock Holmes for the past 100 years. What's one more rip-off? So that was sort of the template, though. And when those bromance memes between them started going around the Internet, which was like, their last few months in office last year, mm-hmm. I saw that there was an interest in the relationship between these two people. And I decided to fictionalize that.
The other thing I love about it is that it is written as if Biden is telling the story. This is written in his first person.
Oh, yeah. Biden has such a great voice that it's like a classic noir, like a Raymond Chandler type, narrator. And it was just too good not to use. I tried to write, in third person, but it just wasn't as interesting or passionate as having Joe Biden narrate it himself. I tried to get into Barack Obama's mind, but you really can't do that. He is sort of an enigma, again, like Sherlock Holmes. You can't get into his mind.
Uh-huh. As I said, Biden is trying to figure out what his future path is. He's at home kind of at loose ends, and all of a sudden his old friend Obama shows up and says, hey, your favorite Amtrak conductor has died. And mm-hmm. there seems to be a little bit more to it. So do you want to pick it up from there a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, without giving too much away,
right.
Joe agrees that, there's something kind of fishy going on here because they found a map with Joe's address on it with the conductor. So they said, was he coming to tell you something? Was there a reason behind this? It doesn't seem to be suspicious to the cops other than this piece of paper. And Joe says, he's known the family for a long time. And, in real life, Joe calls the Amtrak workers his second family. So there's a very personal connection there. So if something like this ever happened, you can imagine him wanting to take some interest in it and not let the cops do their own thing. I mean, he's a great supporter of law enforcement, but at the same time, he's back in Delaware where he hasn't been for 8 years, and I have the people of Delaware in here, kind of, they're not suspicious of him, but they're just like, oh, you left us for a while.
Yeah, what you doing back here all of a sudden here,
Yeah. Oh, you want to act like nothing's changed,
right? Well, was this difficult because they are public figures, but they're also now private citizens, and trying to get them involved in a mystery where we're dealing with a private corporation that's federally subsidized and stuff like that. There are all sorts of little ties that come in, and you kind of wonder, how do you weave them into this? It had to be a little tricky.
Oh, definitely, because you go, oh, well, how many Secret Service people do I surround this person with,
mm-hmm.
make it realistic, but
mm-hmm.
then also to write a book, you can't have an entourage around every one of your characters because there's no story there, so you have to have them, of course, do the classic, let's shake the Secret Service and get them off our tails, and then also, again, interact with all these different agencies in the book. You're like, how would they do that? So that's all completely fictionalized. Mm-hmm. I did contact one of the foremost experts on the Secret Service, a guy who's written a couple of books named Ronald Kessler, and I said, so I just need to know one thing: has a former president ever shaken off their detail and gone rogue like this?
Uh-huh.
And he was like, no. I was like, okay. He said, like, one time I think, like, LBJ drove a golf cart a little bit fast away from them. And I'm like, that's not, okay. Yeah, so I was like, I'm completely on fictional ground here, and so there's definitely a lot of stuff that's fictionalized. But the good news is that, nobody really will know how much is fictionalized because nobody really has that insight into, their personal lives now, besides them.
That was Andrew Shaffer 1 year ago when Hope Never Dies had just been published. We caught up with him recently and talked about his latest Obama-Biden mystery, Hope Rides Again. And I started off by asking him about the success of Hope Never Dies. Congratulations on its success. Did you expect it to be as big a bestseller and as hot as it turned out to be?
I wish I could say I did expect that, but I was really worried that people would see it as just a one-note joke and say, "Oh, well, I get this. It's just a joke. They're, whatever." But I spent a lot of time working on the mystery part of it, and to try to, make sure that could stand on its own, regardless of whether you had these famous politicians there. So I was really relieved, but I was definitely surprised that it caught on as well as it did. And I had and to get to the point where it was so big that Joe Biden couldn't even ignore it. He got a hold of me and said, his people got a hold of me and said, "We want to talk to you." And I was like, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." and I met him, and he couldn't have been any nicer. He was so kind, and he signed a copy of the book for me, and he thought it was funny. I don't know if he had read it, but I think it'd be weird to read a book about yourself. But I think he thought the cover was very flattering.
I think that's cool. Yeah, and here we are now. Hope Rides Again. And there's Obama in his tan suit of all things, Andrew. My gosh.
What am I doing dredging up such an embarrassment, right? What? So some people, may not be familiar with the tan suit incident, but it was it was
huge.
Major news.
That was major.
A member of Congress.
Yeah.
Called it a national embarrassment, a security disaster because it projected weakness to our enemies.
Right.
All because the president decided to dress up for a summer holiday weekend with a light-colored suit.
Right. So here we are, and now does Hope Rides Again, does that pick up right where Hope Never Dies left off? Because, when Hope Never Dies, Biden had just gotten off of a train, it seemed, where he was fighting the guy who was kind of setting him up.
Yeah. It actually takes place 2 years later. It takes place this year, in spring, over St. Patrick's Day weekend in Chicago. So it picks up a whole new story. We skip 2 years ahead in their relationship, and in between they hadn't been solving any crimes. This is just everything in real life happening, and then all of a sudden they get together in Chicago. Barack's BlackBerry goes missing, and they decide, well, we got to investigate and find out where this went. And of course it connects to a larger conspiracy.
Of course it does. Right. So
of course.
Was it difficult to pick it up the way it was? 2 years later, was it difficult to kind of put it together again?
I don't think so because I wanted to have a totally different feel and a totally different take. If I had tried to continue writing the first book, I thought, oh, well, do I just pick it up off this train and do we keep going? And then I go, no, this book has to, so this book, whereas, I thought there were places in the first book that kind of dragged too. And so this book is very compact. It happens completely over a 48-hour period. And so it's a very compact book. There's more action, helicopters, boat chases, skyscrapers, you name it. I really wanted to take advantage of using Chicago as a location.
Here we are at this point in the book. Joe is contemplating running for president. Now he's actually running for president in real life. Does this kind of spoil your fun? Does this kind of get in the way of the Hope series? Does this kind of spoil things a little bit?
Well, it does leave me with a conundrum about where to go next. But I think I'm in the advanced copies he was kind of waffling about whether he's going to run or not. And I know in the final copy that was just published of Hope Rides Again, we had actually changed it so that he does decide to run. So it's a very definite I'm going to run now.
Oh, okay.
So it had to be like a very last minute change. But there is a sense of if they're going to get enough Joe over the next year, how do we continue on to do this character of Joe Biden in the books? Because as you might be aware, at any moment he can say something in real life,
right?
And suddenly, a perception of him can seemingly take a 180 turn.
The first one dealt with opioid epidemics. This one deals with gun violence. You're dealing with big issues. Is it tough to deal with a big issue in something that is essentially kind of light, fun reading?
I think that it gives it sort of a backbone of seriousness. I always treat the characters in the books. I treat the issues and the victims and stuff with respect, and I think that's what you have to do in a mystery or a thriller. Is even if you have a bumbling detective like we do here, where Joe Biden is not the world's greatest detective, he's a little bit bumbling, which is I think what makes him fun as a character. But you do have the victims and stuff are treated with respect. So it's kind of a fine line. I think that you can watch some buddy cop movies that are kind of jokey movies from the 80s where they kind of cross a line and treat anybody who has used drugs deserves to die or something. And you're like, what?
You kind of brought up the thought of Joe being kind of bumbling. In the first book, I thought Barack was kind of, kind of aloof. Do you get that sense? Is that kind of how you've portrayed him still?
Yeah. It's very much a caricature of him. But I think that behind the scenes, I think from everything I've read, he is kind of an aloof kind of guy, to where the fact that the Barack we see now is 15, 20 years ago, Barack was a college professor,
right?
And he went out on stage and he was just like, and blah 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 blah, and his first advisors, David Axelrod and stuff, they were like, oh my God, what have we gotten into? This guy's horrible. And he's all about policy.
Right.
And they're like, you need to connect with people like a human being, Barack.
Right, exactly. Hope Rides Again is out. Is there going to be a third one? You working on one?
Hey, we'll see what happens with Joe, but I've got some ideas.
There you go. Andrew Shaffer, this is always good talking to you, and much success, and thanks for a few minutes out. I hope we can talk again.
I hope so, too.
That's Andrew Shaffer, the author of Hope Rides Again, an Obama-Biden mystery, second book in the series, and it is published by Quirk. And that will do it for this edition of Conversation Collage. Coming up next time, we plan to have the actress Kate Walsh. She of Grey's Anatomy, she of Bad Judge, and a number of other things. We'll find out what she's up to, and also about her pet, her dog, Rosie, and how they keep her on her A game. Thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. Come back for the next Conversation Collage, won't you? Ken Johannesson here. Thank you for listening, and be good to yourself, huh?